What's up, everybody? Yeah, I said it. You are on the house list. You're back on the house list. Someone hit me up a couple of days ago. They said, Peter, they can't find my name. I'm at the club right now. I said, tell them you're on the house list with Peter Agostin. This is a special Thanksgiving week episode. I'm going to do 2 episodes this week. I'm going to try to. Which I've been wanting to do. I'm very grateful to be able to have the opportunity to even do this and to talk to the people I'm talking to on it. Have anybody check it and like it. So if you guys have been feeling this, please subscribe on iTunes. That's the best way to hear it on a regular basis. I'm building it out so you can hear it on a few other platforms, but it's just me and my man CJ, but it's really just me as far as building this thing out. So I got to work at my own pace here. I got a lot of stuff going on. I know you do too. Right now I'm in Virginia. I'm at my parents' house in Blacksburg, Virginia, where I grew up, visiting for the Thanksgiving holiday. So sitting in my old room, quickly trying to knock out a couple intros and outros for you, especially if you're out there traveling this week. Be safe and be careful. If you're stuck home alone this week, if you're preparing for a lot of people to show up at your house and mess up your house, and you're cleaning and you got headphones on, you're making a lot of food and you got headphones on, that's how I prefer to do it. Then check this out. Check this podcast out. Why don't you? It ain't bad. It's not bad. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, I do have a really great episode for today's new joint. It's with the one and only Billy Jam. Yes, Billy Jam. Many people from Northern California, from the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, Vallejo, Richmond, San Jose, they'll definitely know this name, Billy Jam, from HipHop Slam. Also, if you're from the greater New York City, New Jersey area, you'll know Billy Jam from the famed, incredible non-commercial station, a treasure in America, if you ask me, WFMU. And here's a special catch with this particular episode is we were able to go into one of the studios at WFMU in Jersey City, in New Jersey, like a week or 2 ago from this date, and record our episode in one of their studios while Billy was preparing for his own weekly show he has on the air there. So he was generous enough to let me get up in there. Took the train from Brooklyn, peeped out the new World Trade Center stop, which is amazing. I highly recommend doing that on my way. And then, we were in FMU and knocked it out. So if you've ever been a band that played in FMU, we were in that studio where the bands play, So it was cool, and it was the way I really love and hope I can get to a point of doing this show, whereas 2 nice mics, we both had headphones on, we both had a mixing board, so that's the idyllic way for me to get this show to. Right now, I'm doing everything on a handheld Tascam mic. Tascam, holler at me. Right now I'm recording the intro on my phone. I'm not even gonna try to go there with that, but so making it work, and you know what, that's all good. I'm not tripping about that, and the content, in my opinion, is solid, and the conversations are great. So on this episode of The House List, Billy Jam, we did it in a studio. It sounds cool. I really like the way sonically it sounds, and we talked about him coming to the States from Ireland, where he was born, and how he got situated here. He's a really interesting dude, basically a legend on terrestrial radio, but also kind of a pioneer in the pirate radio world. He also helped establish and really helped behind the scenes with a lot of seminal Bay Area hip hop artists. So I'm talking about Master P, E40, Andre Nicotina, um, all the way to Invisible Scratch Pickles, and and I cannot even forget uh, Mac Dre, who he had a really close relationship with. He was a character witness on a trial he had to go through, and Mac Dre spent a few years in jail. Billy Jam was definitely tried to help him a lot during that period of time. They have an amazing few interviews that are floating out there that I highly recommend checking out. So we talk about all that stuff. So it's like a whole range of stuff. It's not just hip hop, but it's about radio. It's about hitchhiking in America. It's about it's just a great conversation. This dude is really cool. He's got an awesome history. Um, I think if you know who he is, then you're really gonna enjoy this because he's been around for a minute too. So he hits on a few different levels for people, but especially if you have any history in radio, terrestrial radio or pirate radio too. And I've done both. So for me, it was a treat to just talk about that stuff with Billy. So again, I hope you guys enjoy it. You are tuned into the House List. It's my weekly podcast. And please subscribe on iTunes. Please leave a comment too. Let me know that you guys are listening. Let me know if you're liking it or not. It's also on SoundCloud as an alternative to iTunes, as the House List podcast. So check it out. And listen, if this is, you're listening to this during your Thanksgiving week and you're traveling or you're with a bunch of people or if you're with nobody at all, I just want to say thank you for spending a little bit of time with me and my guests today. And if you check out any of the other episodes, just know that I do this from a place of love. I love all the people I talk to. I love doing it. And it's very DIY, so that I'm coming from a good place with it. So enjoy. And be safe, y'all. And I'm grateful for y'all. Very thankful to be doing this. Check it out. Check my talk out now. Finally, that I'm done yammering at you. Here's me and Billy Jam, live from WFMU on the House List. Check it out. I'd love to just kind of talk about really quickly where we're recording it, because I've yet to do this. Is kind of an anomaly so far for me, where we're actually recording it in a radio station, in a terrestrial radio station here in New Jersey, in Jersey City at WFMU. And I'm here with Billy Jam, the one and only, as he kind of gets prepared. But it's fun for me because I really got my start in terrestrial radio too. So I'm a little more comfortable here sitting in a chair with headphones and a proper mic. But here we are, WFMU. Billy, how long have you been working here for? Because this is actually where I met you when you were here. But I know that New York isn't really part of your origin story.
Well, WFMU, which is, in my biased opinion, like the best radio station, freeform, listener-supported, is in Jersey City, New Jersey, as you mentioned. I've been here on the air in the studios for 11 years, but for about 4 years before that, approximately, maybe 2 years before that, I was contributing shows to WFMU through Brian Turner, the wonderful music director here, who I got to know from sending him music from my label. And he used to play a lot of it, or the radio station would play a lot of it, including him as a DJ. So 11 years as a regular DJ. But before that, I would do kind of like mix specials. I would put together these turntable orchestration sessions back in California, and we would produce them for this radio station. And then there's one in London called Resonance FM. We would do some for there, and some other stations too we would do them for.
Interesting, yeah. Because you really, there's a couple different reference points for you that I know. But I know that the radio in general has played like a pretty huge part of all the stuff that you've been involved in too. So I'd love to first kind of figure out really like not just where you got your start, but obviously like when you came to the States, like where you're from Ireland?
I'm from Ireland, yeah.
Right. From Dublin or
from
where?
Dublin, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when did you actually move to the States, and did you go because really, for people that might not know, now if you live like in Northern California or in the greater Bay Area, then I think everybody knows who you are. A lot of people do. If you're familiar with WFMU, but did you go straight to San Francisco or to the Bay Area when you came to the U.S. or
Well, first I came. I've hitchhiked across the United States several times.
Really?
And
Okay,
I even
I didn't know that.
up in Canada too. I even like hopped on freight trains one time coming across country. So I kind of like got a real sort of grassroots feel for America traveling around. And the first time I came here was 1978. I came back again in '79, and then I relocated here first to New York City, Upper West Side in '79, towards the end of '79, and was in New York for 2 years. And then I went out then 2 years later to the Bay Area, to California.
Right.
And hitchhiking as well with my girlfriend at the time. We went across country and then settled in Berkeley. And I tried to get involved at first with Calix Radio, and they were like all punk rock then. And they were
Right.
like, well, you don't know enough about the music. And I was like, oh, man, I love music. So I was like, okay, well, that's not going to deter me. So what I did was I started going to the record stores, and I got every record I could. And I listened to the
Okay.
radio nonstop. Calix, KPOO, KUSF.
Right.
All of
All
these
great stations.
Yeah, and actually, even though when I was in New York, I listened to the radio, but I used to listen to the black stations and some of the rock stations, but I didn't really know very much. Like, I really didn't know WFMU, and I didn't know what college radio was. So really, my education for that came about there. What I ended up doing was I would go to these record stores, and there was one called Universal on Telegraph in Berkeley, and you could rent records for the day. So
Really?
you could go in and get a brand new shrink-wrap record like the one you handed me earlier, and take it home and then bring it back, and it would end up costing you $1. If it was used, it would be 50 cents. So I would just go, I would record all of these on these cassettes. So I built like
Right.
a huge library of stuff, and I worked my way through the record store, through every type of music there was.
Like, so you're just, because your show too, I mean, your tastes are pretty eclectic. They're a little bit you're pulling from a lot of different places. So even then you were just, what kind of records do you remember that you were pulling? Because this is what, 1980, 81 or?
Yeah, it was 81, 82,
All right.
and then like I officially began then in 84 at Calix, after sort of like listening to the station, listening to all these other stations, and then like going to these record stores and buying records or renting records and listening to them. And it was all over the place. Like I got into, like I listened to classical. Like I figured that even if I didn't know the music, I would sort of school myself on it. And I learned a lot. And then I started to realize that if you listen to any type of music enough, that you can learn to love it. For example, I'd never really heard like the blues, like the chess blues recordings. And then I just fell in love with those things. I was like, oh my God, like all this music, Muddy Waters, it blew me away
Right.
when I first heard it. I
Yeah.
just like, I didn't know, about this music. So that was sort of my my schooling in it.
Well, it's a world unto itself too. So, what in Dublin? Were you into music then? Were you seeing
Yeah.
music then?
Yeah, I was into music then. My dad was a DJ. And it's funny
Oh.
because just recently, like when Bob Dylan got the Nobel Peace Prize or get nominated for it, I was thinking about how my dad, and it was funny because when I was like 14 in school, and the guys who were in the next level up in O'Connell School, which was the secondary school, like high school I went to, these guys would be like, oh man, your old man's into Dylan? And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I didn't realize that was an unusual thing. But my dad sort of had Bringing It All Back Home, that album. And so I sort of grew up like hearing that. And then he also listened to other types of music too, like rock, folk, and country. And so I kind of learned that. And then I was into, there was sort of the rise of the Irish Celtic folk music, where there was like folk and rock, Celtic folk and rock mixed together.
Right.
Groups like Horselips and that. So I was into all of those. And I was really into Thin Lizzy.
Of course, as
And I
am
was
I.
and I was really into Taste. And then I was so ignorant at the time that I didn't realize that Taste, Rory Gallagher, was borrowing from the American blues. I sort of knew a bit about it, but I really didn't connect all of the dots fully until later on.
Right.
So
well,
that's
even
what
Thin Lizzy, I mean, Phil had a lot of blues, like soulful blues inflection too. I mean, that's some of the best stuff is that really blues heavy Thin Lizzy stuff, I feel like.
Yeah.
Did you ever see him live?
Yeah, I even saw him,
In
even in
Ireland?
New York, I saw Thin Lizzy too.
Nice.
At Webster Hall. It used to be something else.
The Palladium, maybe? Or Ritz?
Ritz.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw it then. But
Dope.
But I also my older brother was into music too, so I would listen to all the records he got. But it's funny, listening back and going back over time, like in Ireland and England compared to America, it was really expensive to buy records.
I bet, yeah.
So it was like twice the price approximately. When I first came to America, I couldn't believe that you could buy an album for as cheap as you could. So, especially if you're broke, and I was really broke,
Sure.
a broke student, I had no money. So if you bought a record then, you really loved it. So I didn't have like a huge collection, but I did treasure whatever records I did.
Well, that
have.
makes renting records pretty pretty enjoyable, I would think. There. So okay, so coming back to Berkeley, and you were living in Berkeley at the time too, or?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that was really where you first settled in California.
Right.
So then what? Talk about just really quickly just settling into CalX, which is pretty much an institution in the East Bay. I mean, it's just like in a way FMU, it's similar. So how did you fall into a show there? Because that's your first show in the Bay, so that's pretty big.
Well, first what I did was, as I mentioned, I went to them, it was like 82, and I went along, tried to get in, and they were like, oh, no, you don't know crap about music. And so I went and tried to figure it out. And then I went back and I realized that it was a tough thing to get into, that it was kind of set up, great DJs, but they weren't giving up their shows. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, how the hell can I get in here? So I thought, I'll create my own show. So I got into public affairs. And I started off in public affairs and then created a public affairs show.
What do you mean? What exactly do you mean by public affairs?
Public affairs is more kind of community interviewing and editing. So I learned editing that way, which is great. And I learned it all on reel-to-reel, which is why I can appreciate, doing it on a laptop now, how simple it is in comparison to literally, getting the razor blade and the white chalk tape and cutting it and doing all this, which I did many, many hours upon hours of for editing like all of the curses out of so many rap songs over the years, which I got in trouble for continually. But so I got into that and then created my own show and then started DJing also, doing like sort of fill-in things. So I sort of figured out a way to beat the system. And then I got in and then I got on the air and was regular DJing, from that, pretty much from near the beginning on the first year. I got like to DJing and then got a show and throughout the 80s. And then I fell into hip-hop music, which was sort of still new and still considered in the early 80s a fad, but I thought it was great.
Was it, so what was that? For you, what was that record?
Well, when I was in New York, of course, that was when I first heard all of the hip-hop music. And I would go up to Harlem to buy my weed, and I'd hear even more music when I'd go up there, because I lived on Upper West Side up by Columbia University on 107, which is a different area than it is now. It's changed a lot since then.
I'm sure.
But so, like, the first ones I heard were all of, like, the regular ones. The Curtis Blow, the Breaks, and Sugar Hill Gang and all of these. And then throughout the 80s, and then like I remember too with CalX, which is really a good example of a college radio for anywhere in the U.S. at the time was, they were playing New Order and Africa Bambaataa like back to back. And those were the stuff that got so much love from people who weren't necessarily into hip-hop, although there wasn't that much. Mm-hmm. So I got into all of that as well. And then all the people coming out, like Fat Boys and different people who had their own sort of take on it.
Right.
And all of that music. And then by the 86, I started to notice that there was a rise in like Bay Area. There was a very few records coming out, but I noticed a lot of rappers out there. And I tried to get into doing the hip hop on the show there that they did it.
With locals?
Yeah, but I tried to get on there, but it was more kind of like African American, and people would look at me like, "Who the hell is this white guy?" And I was like, "No, I really like this music," and so I ended up sort of getting a show then myself, and I did a rap contest in 1986 of Bay Area rap. So I did flyers up, and me and my girlfriend, we used to be like, we were totally into music all the time, and because we had all these cassettes that I'd be constantly making, and then we'd be like doing little mixtapes and mixtures of stuff, and we figured out how to do kind of off of my the setup, the stereo I had, like by pressing down certain buttons, you could kind of mix without a mixer. And then I finally got my little realistic mixer from Radio Shack. But
so a pause mixtape.
Pause mixtape, exactly. Right. So anyway, we do flyers, like we'd have cassette cover art shows. and we did them at our house. And what we did, because we
People
started,
would come over to the
yeah,
house. and
so
check-
we cleared out our living room and basically turned it into a gallery where we lived, and we just put up flyers all over, invited people, and we got a good response from people who had they were like punk rockers, and then guys who were into the Grateful Dead, and some people were into kind of like hip hop stuff, and they would do it. So. But anyway, I started to. So then, when I did this contest like a couple of years later in 1986 for hip hop, local rap, I just went all over the Bay Area and put up these flyers. I did flyers, and got a good response from people. And then I went to a place called Whole Earth Access and said this was like a big store that doesn't exist anymore. And they were like a discount store, and I convinced them to give me a big boombox as a prize. And pardon me.
No problem.
And then I also went to, which was actually not too far from there in Berkeley, and also near where we lived at the time, me and my girlfriend, went down to Fantasy Studios, and I convinced them to give me a whole bunch of records and get somebody a chance to go in and sort of have their music heard.
Ah, I see.
So I did this thing in '86, and the response was really overwhelming. So I had people like Davey D, who hadn't yet started at the station. I had him as a judge, and he was like the Bronx Prince was his name then. He had just got relocated. He was in UC Berkeley at the time as a student, and different people. Oh, and also I had a guy, Rico Casanova, from the Pros record pool. And back then, record pools were very important.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
So that was the Pros record pool was a big Bay Area record pool.
it was in Oakland. It was a big deal because, and that was the thing, like sort of people, like they connect with certain record pools so they could get the in on this music.
Right, for sure. But primarily for like club DJs or mixtape DJs. It was almost less for the radio, but more for the guys that weren't on the radio, but that were serious performance DJs in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. Record pools now kind of don't exist anymore in a way.
Right. Except for, I guess, some of the websites that kind of cater to like electronic DJs. There's certain ones that
You're
do.
right. Yeah. In a way, like even like a Beatport or something like
Exactly,
that
that's what I'm thinking,
would be
yeah.
the modern equivalent of a record pool. I mean, they even had video. I learned this from doing this podcast too. I didn't really realize this, but there were also, of course, music video pools too, because when they play videos in clubs, back in the day before pre-MTV.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure you were seeing even little bits of that as well.
Yeah.
So this concert, that was kind of your break into the
So it was
local
on the
hip hop scene.
yeah. So that was like on the radio. So I did like a series of things where I got people to send in stuff.
Oh, so it was like a battle of songs and stuff, basically. Okay.
And then I put together this, panel of judges for the final show, which included Rico from that Pros record pool, Davey D, and pardon this,
yeah,
and
sorry.
some others. And then we picked the winner. And then the guy, he ended up putting out a record then on the same one on TNT Macola.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
which people would be come to be familiar with through Jerry Heller and NWA and JJ Fad and stuff. Even Egyptian Lover too.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Digital Underground.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. On Macola, but that was a L.A. label, was it not? Or
It was an LA label, and that kind of the Bay Area LA connection was pretty tight because geographically they're only 400 miles apart or less. So a lot of times
Right.
people would do that. Like even with NWA, when they first came up to the Bay Area, they went to Calix Radio in '86 and were on there. And I remember it was Omar Parker had them on, and it was really interesting.
This was when they were probably just promoting the Posse album, right?
Yeah, exactly. The very first records.
Right. Did you meet those guys back then?
No, I didn't meet them then. And again, this was like when it was the Sunday morning crew, and things tended to be a little more segregated. So my thing was to try and break the barriers, and also I was heavily into punk rock. So
Were you mixing the genres on the show?
yeah.
Okay.
So my thing was, so that's why I came up with the name Hip Hop Slam, not as in slam spoken word, but more like slam dancing.
Right.
So my thing was to take, Minor Threat and then the hip hop of the day and sort of play both of those back to back.
How closely were you involved with like the punk scene in San Francisco and Oakland in the mid '80s? Was it an equal tit for tat? Because I mean, a lot of people know you from hip hop, but how involved were you with bands and that community?
I was pretty closely involved. Operation IV, Basic Radio, who preceded Operation IV, I used to have them come on my show a lot.
Cool.
So I was and they would to perform live. And with the punk band, so I learned to sort of like, I love radio. I love the art form of radio and always have. So what I would do is I wouldn't even have like we are in here now at WFMU where it's like a full setup in the next room.
Right.
And underneath here is a whole mixing board. This is geared for recording like a live band. Drum kit, everything that's like all sort of isolated and done. I would do the opposite. I would have like just total ghetto dirt style. So what I do is I would say, like, if this was the radio and you're the vocalist, I'd have you there. And if you were to play guitar, I'd have you say, kind of keep your guitar amp away a little over there. And we'd put the drummer in the doorway because we know he'd be really loud. And we just sort of do it that way.
Just pick it up with the mic.
We pick it up, and then I'd have this mic up here so that we might have the bass player standing here, and he might be doing the backing vocals. So on 2 mics, we would do these sessions. And actually, they came out okay.
Right. I mean, that would be more, you see that a lot more back in the day, for sure. So yeah.
So I wasn't as heavily, to answer your question, I wasn't as heavily into punk rock, but I was into it, and I just loved it.
Would you? I mean, now this is not to sidetrack too much, but really quickly, Operation Ivy is like preeminent California ska band. Now, knowing that there's a large history of ska, of original ska music from Jamaica and from Great Britain too, like, what was your thoughts on a band like Operation Ivy, which is very different from that style of the original ska stuff? Like, what was your take on it just then? I just curious, since
I liked
you were
it.
there.
I liked it, but I mean, I was into, and Calix Radio also was heavily into the British second wave of ska too, and the first one, because if you recall, like in the 80s, reggae was a lot more popular than like it is even now.
Right.
And, there was so much crossover. Groups like The Clash, who they bridged the gap and incorporated a lot of stuff. And Linton Kwesi Johnson would be as popular on the college radio as, a regular punk rocker, even more so than hip hop even at the time.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm just curious.
But for me, I liked them. I just thought it was like a whole new take on a traditional sound.
Yeah, totally. And even like the Bay Area hip hop too is so unique to its kind of sound and its history and origin that's really incomparable to any other region if you're going to talk about regional music and stuff too. So but now we did figure out the origin almost of hip hop slam, which would evolve into not only the show, but it would eventually be a record label too.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, but some time definitely would elapse until that. So when, like, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but when did you start creating Hip Hop Slam into a label as well? That's like later in the late 90s, right? Mid 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, latter 90s actually.
Okay.
So what I did first was under an alias. I worked in commercial radio too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I also learned that, if you really want to do something, you got to just kind of focus on it and figure out, like I was saying about how I couldn't get a DJ slot on Calix because everybody wanted it and the guys who were on there weren't moving. And it was sort of set up. So I figured, okay, how can I get in there? And I thought, I'll create a show. Like I'll do a half-hour talk show, go out, interview bands, do this, that, and the other, and then kind of figure it out. The same thing like with the radio too. My first commercial radio job was in 1986. I got a job, and they were like, okay, well, it's in the news department, and you'll be writing sports. Are you into sports? And I'm not going to hate sports. I just couldn't give a damn about sports.
Yeah.
Not American sports. I like soccer, some European sports, but mainly just soccer, football. So I realized that, hey, you can figure out anything. And then they were like, you have to type too. But I had taken a typing course in New York. I'd gone to one of the colleges here and just learned, but never practiced it. Well, I figured it out right away. And I did it and jumped in and got a job there.
What was the station?
It was at KKCY, the city.
That's obviously can't be there anymore, right? Is it something?
No, it's long gone.
Right.
But that's sort of, I figured out kind of ways just sort of to worm your way in or sort of create your own thing. So that's kind of how I did it. And when I was there then, some of the people, they had been, and again, as a fan of radio as, a medium and an art form, there were some of the guys who had been there from the stations, the original freeform stations in San Francisco, like the KMPX, I think it is, and different ones. So there was like Norm Davis, and they had K-San. They had the original, the Sex Pistols had been on there when they came, and they played in January 14th, 1978, the final show in San Francisco. And before that show, they went on the radio. So I got all the original reel-to-reel recordings of this and all of these other back stuff from Norm Davis, who was on K-San.
Wow. You still have that stuff?
Yeah. So what I did then was I edited it all down as a special for Calix. And then I thought, this is so cool. I really love it. And it was more interesting was when the people would call in on the phone and they'd start messing with the listeners. And that was like even funnier, and it was really like entertaining. So I did that under an alias name, like because it was essentially a bootleg. So I put that out as a CD, and that was my first CD, and that kind of gave me the idea for it. And I thought, okay, well, this is how you put together a CD. You get the music, you edit it, which I already had, then you track it, then you master it, then you come up with the artwork, and then you get the cover art done. You get the proofs for the covers and so on and so forth. So that was sort of my test run, and I did it as a benefit for like AIDS charity. So all the money went to that, and it was kind of fun to do it. And then that was what gave me the idea. And then I did the first ones were Invisible Scratch Pickles. I did those, and then I realized, which we had done in my living room as part of like this pirate radio series. So I started putting them out, and then I thought, okay, this is cool. So I took the money I got from that and then started putting out compilations, and all did about 50 different releases. Most of them were like really, lo-fi recordings. A lot of them were compilations, a lot of scratch music, which Dave Paul with Bomb HipHop had already done. So I was really kind of following his lead, but we shared all of the same taste in music. So.
Right. Which I wanted to talk to, too, about your connection with Dave Paul, Bomb HipHop magazine, which started as a magazine first, right?
Exactly.
So because I can only assume that as your work kind of dabbling in radio started to evolve and your taste evolved living there, you started writing as well. You wrote for a lot of these publications around there too, right?
Yeah, and again, it's kind of weird. Like how things just sort of happen, and it's probably the same with you, how you just sort of fell into things by doing what you love, first and foremost. So that's what I did. So then with this commercial radio station, I started off writing sports, then I ended up getting on the air, which was great. And so then I was like a DJ on a commercial station. At the same time, I was still on Calix doing punk rock. And then I had also gotten into KPFA, which is a Pacifica station, like the WBAI here. And, I used to hang out with the guys who did Maximum Rock and Roll, the punk rock show.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I would go in their show, but just like occasionally I was I wasn't really a hardcore, but I would contribute. And then I'd go over like to Tim Yohannan. He was the guy, the late great Tim Yohannan in San Francisco. And he had this amazing record library, and we'd go over and just sort of hang out and file records and put things together.
For people that don't know who that is, who is that really quickly?
Well, he's like the founder of Maximum Rock and Roll, which is this, like, it was a radio show and then also like a magazine. Well, still exists.
Still is a magazine.
Still exists.
A punk rock newsprint tome, if you will. Right.
And one of the things, if I may blow my own horn, is that I feel kind of happy about it was that, like, in the 80s, when I went in there, I was responsible. Like, I was into a lot of Japanese and Italian punk rock. Like, I'd hear this stuff, and even though I didn't know what the hell they were saying, but I just loved all of this music. But I also was the first one to play hip-hop on Maximum Rock and Roll. I kind of convinced them to let me play something.
Hell yeah.
And but what I was going to say is that one of the things I learned from them was I loved how they would do these shows and they would record them onto cassette and then they would dub them off and then send them out and they would get replayed. So I borrowed that idea from them for when I started doing the Pirate Fucking Radio series, when I started doing like pirate radio after getting kicked off regular radio.
So did you do something to get kicked off with this Calix or
Yeah, Calix I got asked to leave, and then I went over to KUSF because I would get in trouble so often, like for smoking weed in the studio downstairs, but mainly for playing the curses. And they were like,
it's a big no-no. I mean, was your show during the daytime or something? Or?
Yeah, it was during the daytime.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And different things. Like I remember I'd go to Leopold Records on the way to the show, and bear in mind that before the industry got involved, which was technically like around 91, 92, when the Gavin set up, I guess 90 onwards.
When the Gavin Convention set up.
The Gavin Convention and then the Gavin Report, which was the trade magazine that gave birth to the convention.
Which is for basically for people that don't know.
For the radio industry.
Yeah, for commercial, non-commercial radio.
Exactly.
Right.
And so they'd been doing it, but they didn't do hip hop or rap as it was commonly called back then. So once they got into it, then labels are like, oh, well, we can sell more units because this DJ in this market is playing it. So then they started sending out promos. Before that, DJs would. That's why it was so good to be in a record pool. Otherwise, you had to buy all your own records. So a lot of stuff I'd have to buy. And I remember going to buy America's Most Wanted Ice Cube when he first put out, like it was the first solo post NWA.
Right.
And I bought it on the way to the radio station to Calix when I would do my show. Then I was on Sunday afternoon from noon till 3. And of course, it's full of curses. And
Yeah, it's not a radio record.
No, it's
not
not.
a daytime radio record.
But you're like, okay, on this hand, I got this amazing new record. I really want to play it. I just got it. It just came out. And then on the other hand, it's risking, getting kicked off. But anyway, that was one of the ones I got in trouble. And I did get suspended. They didn't quite kick me off. That happened when I went over then to KUSF because Calix, the general manager at the time, said, they do have an opening because the hip hop show that they were doing is no longer going to be there, so you could like move over there perhaps. So that's what I did, and then lasted there for about 3.5 years, and then I got in trouble all the time. And then one day I was playing like Public Enemy, Music in Our Message. I got the advance on it, and just played it. And traditionally, Chuck D, Public Enemy, they don't curse. Well, they do curse on that one, and that was my third and final warning, so I got kicked off.
Man. Who were your contemporaries in radio in the Bay at that time?
My contemporaries in radio, well, there was Davey D was there with me. He sort of came on a little bit afterwards. Ricky Vincent, the Uhuru Maggot. And then a guy who came along a little after but joined me on the air, because I found that it was a lot more fun when you have two people on the air, was G-Spot, a.k.a. Gary Baca. And he was on, and he still does radio. He's on KPFK and KPFA. And
was Sway and King Tech, that was much
Sway and King, no, they were there too. Sway and King Tech, they were on KMEL. And then there was KPOO, really was the radio station, in my opinion. It's like amazing. They were playing it before anyone else, and there was DJs like Marcus Clemens, G-Man, and many, many more. But they were all on at the same time. And Kev at KZSU.
Yes, KZSU. That's
and Kev
Santa Cruz or no? Am I wrong? I'm sorry. I should not miss that.
Stanford. But you're right. And then also Cutmaster Kurt, he was on there too. And of course, like some of the guys, I think Cutmaster Kurt might have lived in Santa Cruz as well, but it was on Stanford.
Right. Yeah, radio in the Bay is incredible history. It's really undeniable, if not probably one of the greatest, I think, markets in America.
And KFJC is another great station. I mean, there's so many good ones in the Bay.
Right. So then Pirate fucking Radio, which a lot of people know you for that too. So that and you know what? My first like foray into pirate radio was when I lived in California. I lived in Arcata. I went to college in Humboldt State.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of weed you smoked probably came from there.
And do you know K-Mud, that station?
Of course, I know K-Mud. Yeah.
Because Ken, the station manager here, has sort of collaborated with them on things, and I'm hoping to do a show with them.
Oh, cool. I hope so. Yeah, great
it's
people.
It's a good station.
Yeah, and KHSU, which is the Humboldt State radio station, but there is actually a long-running pirate radio station that's moved around. It's in a van somewhere that moves around Humboldt, and there's just something.
What's it called?
The call letter, I think it's the frequency in the call letters have changed over the years. It's just Humboldt Free Radio or Humboldt Pirate Radio.
Yeah.
But there's some really great people. I DJ'd and rapped on it and hosted shows in some of the weirdest locations too.
Yeah.
Like usually in someone's garage or a loft or something like that. But pirate radio in California and on the West Coast really is a serious phenomenon, and I hope it's still thriving. It's been a while since I lived in California, but
yeah, it's not. I mean, the internet kind of killed off a lot of things or made them less relevant.
Right.
But there still is. The one I got involved with was Free Radio Berkeley.
Oh, nice.
So former Calix DJ Paul Griffin, he was he used to do reggae on Calix, and then he hooked up with this guy, Stephen Dunifer, and he'd been telling me, he's like, yeah, there's this free radio Berkeley, and it's pirate radio. And I knew, because in Ireland I grew up on pirate radio.
Right, because there's no college radio in
No.
in Europe and the UK and stuff, and
Right, and that's the other thing too. Like you were asking at the beginning of this conversation about like listening to music, and you know you hear it all the time. Like you read any interviews with people, and they talk about how they were kids. You know, they'd have the transistor under their pillow at night,
Right.
and that's how you would hear Radio Luxembourg. And Tony Prince with the DMC is connected with there, but they played such an important role, and that's because like and even the BBC at the time, it was lame. I mean, there was one station and in Ireland there was. RTA, the radio station, one station, the government station, and if you're lucky, you'd hear like a little bit of pop music, and that's why Top of the Pops on television on a Thursday night, half hour of music would play such an important role for people because you just couldn't get the music.
that's all you got was half an hour.
That's all you got. And then in the 70s, latter 70s, pirate radio came along in Ireland, and they started like playing all this stuff, like all of the punk and all of the punk, and then later the new wave bands, and they totally blew it open, and it was a revolution. But at the time, the police, the Garda would come around, and they would like batter in the doors. It would be like in some building, and they would destroy all the equipment or take it all. Beat up the people in there, So these were the guys who would do like these radio stations. So that was the pirate radio that I was familiar with. And then Paul Griffin said, no, this guy, Stephen Dunifer. So I had just gotten kicked off of KUSF in, I guess it was 94. And I said, you know what, because he'd been asking me, he said, yeah, you should do these things. Because he said, we have this van and we'll drive up into the Berkeley Hills up by Tilden Park. And then we'll just park there. And then we have this thing, and we tap it into like a battery for a car radio battery. And then we can do it. And you just need this, this, and this. So I was fascinated by it all. And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this now. So then I connected with those guys and then started doing the pirate radio.
Just out of that van.
Yeah.
And they had gear in there? They had
gear.
turntables? And
Yeah. No, they're just basic gear. So what I ended up doing was I was like, well, he said, you could just do a recording, a cassette. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I started doing that, and then we would record it. So it would be like you and me sitting down here, and we would record it in real time onto a cassette, a high bias cassette, later DAT, when I bought a DAT player, a recorder, and just record it, and then as if it was in real time, and then showing in the music and no edits, and then that would be it. And then dub off copies. And then I started kind of connecting, as I mentioned earlier, with taking the Maximum Rock and Roll model and getting it. I thought, well, you just do the one thing, and then you can send it out. And I would make these dub off these cassettes, and I'd send them. There was Free Radio Santa Cruz, which was a pirate station.
right.
And then I would go visit these stations too. Like in Santa Cruz, there was Skidmark Bob, and I went down there, and they had this like little shed out the back of a house where they would broadcast from. And then there was down in Miami, there was one called The Bomb. Up in Seattle, there was Free Radio Seattle. And then in the Lower East Side, and again, this was a time like mid-'90s, early mid-'90s when Lower East Side was still pretty like hardcore.
Sure, definitely.
So there was one called Steal This Radio, and they were in, it was basically a squat, and then they jacked the electricity to get in there. And I went to visit them too, but they were among the ones. And I think at one stage it was maybe 11 or 12 stations that we would send out the pirate fucking radio / fuck the bullshit. That was like the original name for it. The radio shows, which we ended up doing like 100 in all.
Oh, amazing. Oh, 100 episodes.
100 episodes.
Yeah. So it was like a syndicate, like almost like an underground syndicated show.
Yes.
Physically mailing the cassettes of them. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was when, I ran into Qbert and those guys one night. I was out, and then they were like, oh, what's going on? And I go, we heard you got kicked off the air. That's messed up. And I go, yeah. And I said, well, I started doing this thing now where we do these. And they go, oh, we'll come through and do one. And that was how the Sugar Fragger show kind of came about. It's just sort of by accident.
Right.
And then there was like the one, I think, with the coup, where I recently posted that thing. Like different people would come by and hang out.
So come by to what, your house?
My house. So I would do them in my house, just do them in the living room, and then we just record them there. And that was sort of the setup. And it was just sort of, a basic little setup, but just, again, just coming back to it and having a bit of fun. And I really felt strongly about the music, and I felt I was so tired of constantly getting in trouble over having to edit things and not play curses and spending hours and hours of editing. And I just felt that it fucked with the art form, that this is the way it's made. And my feeling was that you don't mess with poetry and start taking out words. You don't take paintings and start, blanking out parts of it. because you're essentially messing with an art form. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to do this and sort of, quote unquote, keep it real, and sort of threw myself into that. And I thought, fuck radio, I'm sick of it anyway, which I was of commercial radio, but I still did love the stations like WFMU, but I kind of refused to do it until then, the end of the 90s, and I went back via KPFA.
Yeah, but during that pirate radio time is when, I mean, you really helped a lot of those then somewhat underground artists. I mean, especially with the DJ, your kind of help spreading that music of like Invisible Scratch Pickles,
Well-approved Scratch Hamsters.
Yep, DJ Quest, Live Human, all of these like guys that during that time, that shit was like really like blowing up like through the mid to late 90s too, and really propelled these guys, especially Qbert and Mixmaster Mike and I mean any number of these guys into like international like stars for DJing, because the DMC competition, like you mentioned Tony Price,
Prince,
Prince,
right.
Yeah, who's like your doppelganger if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I know,
right?
It's so funny. Someone bought me a drink once, and they were like, "Yeah, you're welcome, Tony." I'm like, "Oh, okay, okay, I'll keep the drink."
Tony was the kind of original host or judge of the DMC DJ competition.
Yeah,
right.
The founder.
So,
yeah,
the founder. Right,
yeah,
right. So yeah, I mean, and I love to talk about that, but conversely, at the same, almost simultaneously, you're also like kind of helping put on or at least supporting and nurturing a lot of the hip hop stuff that's coming in the Bay at that time. And it's not just underground shit. It's like really a mix of like the hard gangster shit of that era, as well as like the real like esoteric, somewhat like dirty, grimy underground shit. So
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of explore that just a little bit, because you and I would even say like my good friend DJ Steph too.
Yep. Shout out to DJ Steph, Vinyl Exchange.
Big shout out to DJ Steph and Vinyl Exchange. Just like David Paul's Bomb Hip Hop magazine, these are these little elements or icons within the Bay Area community that really kind of was the glue, I feel like, that brought that. Also P- of ATAC. I feel like there's these kind of community members.
It's funny I should mention, sorry to interrupt, but I just sort of came across his catalog. I had forgotten about him for a while.
Vast. Yeah. So I would love to talk about some of those artists too, because you were even on some of these guys' albums. And 11-5,
yes.
Mind you, on Dog Day Records too. But please go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that, again, like when you think about, we were talking about record pools, and it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the present tense and forget about how different things really were. And of course, the internet is the big game changer, pre-internet and later. But there's other things too. And one of the things that, rap versus hip hop, the word comes up, like, I was digging up, going back to 1994, I did a thing for Amoeba blog, who I write for all the time,
right,
on tracing back charts from 1994. Billboard was hot rap singles. Rap was the word they used for their top 40 weekly chart. The Gavin was also rap, was the word that they used for their singles chart. So it was still used generally. But in the Bay Area, it was kind of like there was two different, like say, going back to 1994, 22 years ago. At that stage, there was a big division between hip hop and rap. And a lot of times there'd be guys who would say, like, oh yeah, I'm a hip hop DJ. I don't fuck with that rap shit.
Right.
Meaning I would never play Orbiel Posse. And that was literally what DJs, friends of mine who would say, and I go, oh, it's good. They go, SIBO, they're like, that's not even music. That's not hip hop. That's just that gangster street shit. And I kind of always tended to embrace it all.
Right.
And I really did like it all. But it was quite different. But the thing is that I would sort of do that. So there was sort of the Souls of Mischief. They would have fallen under the hip hop. And they would be, so a lot of the DJs would tend to play more East Coast stuff, because generally speaking, most Bay Area music was mob, street, and gangsta or Mac, as in Too Short,
Sure.
Pimp Mac Daddy stuff. Whereas East Coast was different. And also the whole structuring of the music too was different. The production was quite different, and West
Very
Coast
much
always
so.
tended to be bass heavy because it was made for listening to in the car.
Right.
So that was one of the differences. But I did. I loved it all, and it's interesting because I go back and I listen, and it'll be like totally all over the place.
Right.
Whereas the music, and I would always incorporate that. So whether it was hardcore gangster or not. So with 11.5, I was also I would collaborate as a writer, like I did television. So I do video shows, playing hip hop music. I ended up doing writing, and what I was starting to say earlier was at the radio station, I ended up on the commercial radio station. And then one day, I think it was like in 1987, I got a a phone call from somebody and said, "Hey, I'm the editor. I just took over as editor of San Francisco Independent, and I really like your show. Would you be interested in doing a weekly music column? And we'll pay you like $75 a week," which is even like, that was a lot of money then. I'm like, great,
Sure.
I'd do it. And so that's how I sort of ended up doing it. Consequently, when the Source magazine, which I heard about through City Hall distributors who I was friendly with, and that was my way of getting my free music. Some people would start up fanzines to get it, but I was hooked up with these different people. And then Walter Zelnick at City Hall, he's like, "Yeah, there's this." And I said, "Yeah, I heard about that. I read about it in Billboard, actually, The Source out of Boston." So I got in touch with them, and I ended up writing for them. And I'd already been writing for the San Francisco Independent. So all of that sort of led to me. Then I would end up connecting with all of these people. I would write all the bios, the press releases, and I would help people with how to kind of structure their press releases.
Who did you write bios for?
Virtually everybody. So like you name it, I did them all.
In the Bay?
In the Bay. And then
Right.
I would hook up with the national labels that did it too. So Tommy Boy, I did all of the Tommy, so like all of these different ones, Digital Underground.
Right.
And then like Too Short, E40 when he finally got signed.
To Jive.
To Jive, I would do all of theirs, but I would also do all of these local guys too.
Right.
So I was sort of well connected with the music people who were a one-stop, and they also owned In a Minute. So I do all the In a Minute's things, and I would sort of, one thing leads to another. And there was Funky Fat Graphics. They were a company that would do. They were like Pen and Pixel down in Texas, I believe.
Right.
So they were kind of early on in using computers, which was again, then versus now was a big deal.
Sure.
So they would do that. They did nearly all the album covers, and I did nearly all of the bios and that. So consequently, I got to know all these guys. So people like 11.5, they're like, "Yeah, come on over to the studio. We're over with TC and the Enhancer over in the Fillmore over there. Stop by." So I go over there, and we'd be smoking. I mean, one thing I shared with everybody was I love weed, so I'd be smoking with them. And we were outside joking, and then we were like joking. There was like this white couple walk by, and then they see all these black guys, and then me, the white guy, stand there, and they cross the street and walk away. This is in the Fillmore, and we were laughing about it. This was like taking a break. I was interviewing them for doing their bio,
Right.
and then I was like saying, "Hey, you're not going to jack me." I was like making a little joke. They
Sure.
said, "You should come in and do that. We'll record it now." So we went in, and TC, the producer, was there, and they recorded the thing, and that sort of led me to doing then these drops. So then people would sort of say, "Hey man, can you do a drop for me?" Pooh Man,
Pooh Man, all right.
EA Ski, different people. So I ended
Amazing.
up doing those as well.
Right. How did it I mean, I would love to get even a little more specific, and I'm trying to think because it's not like I wrote a list of these artists, but I know one of the more heralded ones and one of the most iconic ones of the Bay was Mac Dre.
Yes.
And you obviously had a real close relationship with Mac Dre.
Exactly.
And in fact, you just kind of unearthed this incredible interview you did with him in 1996 while he was incarcerated.
And I have another one, like I think it's from '91, where he's doing a track with Kyrie, his producer, playing acoustic guitar.
Wow.
And it's him like sort of doing one of his songs over like an acoustic version. So I'd had him on the show, and then that one that you're referring to was when he was incarcerated. But I was also a character witness in the federal court. So I went up to Sacramento as a character witness on behalf of Mac Dre. I did that for some other artists too. And
Really?
again, because I'm sort of like the white guy, and so like sort of this older white guy, so I dress up nice and it would sort of carry a little bit more weight and maybe
Right.
sort of help sway and and I became very close and friendly with these guys, and like Mac Dre, I just thought he was a really nice, good guy, and
Yeah.
I felt like he was just totally railroaded. And that interview you're referring to, addressed it. I mean, he went to jail for just under 4.5 years. He spent in jail in federal, to the penitentiary.
And what's it called?
Lompoc.
Lompoc, which is down in Southern California.
Yeah, and he did get moved around a little bit too. But he went to jail based, for a crime he didn't. It wasn't like on a crime he committed or he wasn't even there, but they still
Right.
sent him off.
Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar with this too, and you should, if you go to the Hip Hop Slam YouTube page, there is an audio clip of this. But apparently he went down to Fresno with some friends to and he had just done a show down there with like Big Daddy Kane and a bunch of people, and he just they bagged him up on on a trumped up charge, and Billy did a phone interview with him from prison, but.
And I did another one with him from Fresno because first they arrested him and they put him in Fresno County, and that was where he did the EP. He did a whole tape from there that was put out, released.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. So, what was the first time you guys connected? Was it when he came onto the show, or?
Yeah, when he came onto the show. First there was the Mac. The Mac was killed, so that was kind of the guy who was before him, and this is on Kyrie's Young Black Brother label.
Right.
So then next came along Mac Dre. And so then he came on the show, and then I wrote about him in the Source magazine and in other, I wrote for other magazines and papers as well. And he came on the show, and then I was even in the California Living video.
No way.
So I kind of connected him with this friend of mine who was just starting to do video. So again, it was like a real small little world, and then I dabbled in a little bit of everything, whether it was writing or radio or doing the video things, but also just knowing all these different people and then just sort of connecting.
Please go ahead.
No, and it was kind of like this own little self-contained scene because, again, especially with the gangster stuff, people are like, oh, well, no one gives a shit about this anywhere except for here in the Bay Area, so we'll just sort of do it for ourselves. So all of these gangster rappers from San Francisco or from wherever, they just kind of did their own thing, and it was a self-contained little sort of close-knit community consequently.
Right. Did you know or encounter Master P at that time? Because he had the Real Untouchables, True.
I did all of Master P's bios.
Nice. What was that like? What was he like? Because this is his beginning of his career was in the Bay Area, right?
Exactly. So he's from Louisiana. He moved to the Bay Area, to the East Bay, to the city of Richmond, California, which is a pretty tough, sprawling area. And he was there, and then he had his label downtown Oakland over by the lake, and No Limit it was called. So he started out, and then he first there was Herm Lewis, who I also knew and worked with. He got out of jail, and he put out his compilation, which was Trying to Survive in the Ghetto, a San Francisco compilation. And that was in '93.
So who was on that?
So that was Rappin' Forte, Orbiel Posse, JT the Bigger Figure, and all of these other great artists from San Francisco. So that sort of took off, and that really deserves a lot of credit because in different markets, like in Detroit, in different places like Kansas, different places across the country, they would get those CDs, they started listening to them. And interestingly, when you go back and you listen to early 90s music from a lot of places around the country, you're like, wow, that sounds kind of like Bay Area stuff. And part of the reason is that people, usually they listen to something and then a year later they do their record and it sounds like what they've been listening to. And that was part of the reason. In the case of Master P, Master P, I really greatly admire him primarily as a businessman and a very shrewd, savvy guy and very hardworking. So I knew him from early on. I'm even in one of his videos too.
What? Really?
When they gone. Generally, I'm the white guy in the video. And it's funny, with the Mac Dre, when I was looking at it online recently, and someone's like, how people are with comments on YouTube, like, who the hell is that white boy? And I was laughing.
That's Billy Jam.
But Master P, I was in his too, and but I would do all of the different things. But what I admired about him, so we worked closely together, and I would sort of give him little tips on things that I would see, that sort of just suggestions. But he would get up early in the morning and work his ass off, and he really worked hard. His brother, Kevin Miller, had been killed, and he kind of took that as an inspiration. And he would sort of go in, like KML Radio, I forget if it was Monday morning or Tuesday, they'd have their meetings where they'd take presentations from local artists, independent artists with the music. And he just hustled and just tried everything. So he'd stop by my house, and he might have some of the guys with him. is some who are relative, like Silk the Shocker,
No way.
King George, different people. They do it, but they would work really hard. And
They must have been like teenagers at that time, right? They were young guys,
I
right?
guess they were, yeah, because this was like back in the early '90s, and then like he saw how Herm Lewis did this thing with the compilation, so he kind of took that, and so did D-Shot with the Boss Ballin compilation, and they realized like, wow. And again, this is when people actually bought music. Nowadays, Billboard album charts, someone could have a #1 album, and maybe if it's Lady Gaga, it might sell 2 million copies, but it could even be a #1 Billboard album, top seller of the week, and it may only sell 45,000
Right.
for the whole country.
Right.
So back then, you have these guys, and they were selling, like D-Shot, I think it was like 100,000 or something. And so then West Coast Bad Boys was the one that Master P did, and he put it together and did the whole thing. And then Dwayne Terry, who did Tired of Me. E40 is another guy that I was very supportive of early on. And
Right.
people are like, oh man, he's whack. It's like rapping too fast. He can't really rap. He's
People
not that.
slept on him so hard
Yeah.
in the early days, yeah.
But anyway,
the whole clique.
Yeah.
I mean, the clique there's a lot of talent there, but we can talk about that in a
Right.
second.
But anyway, this guy, Dwayne Terry, who is a really talented guy, video producer, does radio. He's down in Florida now. And he was upstate New York. But anyway, he started doing like all these different videos. So he did like those ones. He also did the Master P. He did Tired of Being Stepped On. He did many other ones for Sick With It. And then he also did that Master P, the big, the one where there was all of them. I forget what it's called, but it's from that compilation where everybody was on it.
Right.
And so Master P did that. And then at the same time, he kind of relocated back to New Orleans and then, tapped into everything. And sort of like Young Bleed, like people from there and from all over, like Texas and New Orleans. He was like, a lot of people would diss him, like he kind of copied the Loonies, Ice Cream, and like, he took different things and he would copy. But really, he was more like, sort of like a Puff Daddy in a way, that he was just shrewd and he knew what to take. Like,
Absolutely.
He was more of a smart businessman.
He was kind of a genius, honestly.
Exactly.
Like,
And I give him, major props for all of the things that he did. So he kind of took that and then took it down south and basically took the Bay Area model, the blueprint, and then kind of, perfected it and then took it national.
right. And honestly, now, I don't know the history of down there that well, but I say there probably wouldn't be like a Cash Money and all that stuff, Lil Wayne and
Exactly,
Birdman
exactly.
and so on and so forth, if it wasn't really for Master P to go back there and apply that blueprint.
Exactly.
So, which is pretty incredible to think too, because that scene obviously like is huge in its own right for so many reasons. But and then like,
And may I interject one
Sure,
thing?
please.
Another thing too that I give the Bay Area major props for, and I have so much love and respect for all of these guys, be it E40 or Too Short or Master P, in that they perfected the DIY. And they did it, and that's how they did it. And I think that they deserve credit for because at that stage, like there's so many people, I saw them like from the 80s, true, like they'd be kind of sitting around waiting for a big label to sign them, and it never really happened. And then sometimes people would give up. And then thanks to, the good example of artists like, Too Short, who would do it out the trunk at first with him and
Right.
Randy Austin, and then E40, who really, they worked it, man. They knew how to do it. They would like literally fly over to some place, some like in the Midwest, and spend the weekend just sort of going around, promoting and selling out the trunk their releases. But all of these guys, they perfected it, and they proved that you could do it yourself and then land your deal with Universal, as in the case of a Master P.
Right.
But you controlled it more, and you had more of the profit.
Yeah, and by putting that initial legwork in, you are in more control of your career than if you just go straight into a deal,
Exactly.
where then you'll be beholden to that label, and you'll
Who
never
will drop you
recoup.
by the second album.
Yeah, and you'll never recoup that advance, and then you won't know how to be self-sufficient afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that blueprint too of pressing your own tapes, making your own merch, that resonated in the Bay for decades after that. I mean, there wouldn't be Living Legends, Anticon, Hieroglyphics, Hobo Junction. Probably if it wasn't for that first like groundwork of Too Short, E40. I mean, it's safe to say that, right? In a way.
Very, very
Right.
safe. And those are good examples, too, because Living Legends, Mystic Journeyman, and Hobo Junction, they'd be out in Telegraph just pounding up and down the street selling their tapes. And they really did that, and it's like they worked it, and they They did the whole thing. Truly, they're more DIY than anything. And Living Legends, I mean, I just give them so much props too. Like they were funny about it too. Like they had UHB, Unsigned and Hella Broke,
Right.
and that was their little magazine. And then they would have their top ramen parties. So you'd come along and sort of give some top ramen and pay like 99 cents something to get in. So they had food to live off of and some money, which I think was like they kind of took that. I think because I think punk rockers used to do that in New York, where they'd have like a pizza party, like where you pay in a little bit and bring some food as well.
Right, right. Yeah, they had their own micro industry in itself too, like 1998, 99. I mean, even really through the mid 90s, all through the mid 2000s,
Right.
for sure.
They lived in a warehouse out in East Oakland before they moved down to LA, and then sort of got everybody else, like the Grouch and different people on
Right.
there. So, yeah, props to Living Legends and Hobo Junction too.
Yeah, I mean, you must have obviously worked with Saphir too, who's
Yes.
so also very slept on too. You know,
Yeah.
like-
Exactly, aka the Saucy Nomad when he started out, and he was associated with different people, including Digital Underground.
right.
Very talented guy.
Did you ever work with Tupac? Did you know Tupac during that Digital Underground, inception?
No, I met him briefly once, but I never really got to know him.
Because Shock G really ran the show, right?
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
And Jacques G is also deserves credit for the Loonies too.
Of course. Yeah, for sure.
A funny story, if I may jump in, is like the video show. We used to do it in Oakland on a station called Soul Beat. This was in '93. So when they finished Ice Cream Man, Chris Hicks. So there's Drew Down, Chris Hicks. Drew Down kind of introduced, like through his record, introduced the Loonies. So he did Ice Cream Man, the one I was saying about how Master P kind of borrowed from it. But he had the video, and I remember like. I also got kicked off the TV show too for stuff like they were like, "You got too many guns and booty in the videos," and their one was like they're cooking up cocaine in the kitchen, and it was just like full of like stuff. And I was like, they had just finished the video, so they brought it in physically. Chris Hicks comes in, we got I go, "It's clean, right?" And they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah," and it was so
Sure.
funny because we got in trouble for that one, but. Anyway,
That's amazing. What about going back to the magazines too? Obviously, the Bay produced some pretty seminal ones. Murder Dog was a Bay Area magazine.
Yes,
right?
yes.
4080 too.
4080.
Did you have much involvement with those two?
I did, yeah. I was involved with those. 4080 looked like 4080 came along.
Who ran those two?
Well, Murder Dog, Black Dog Bone, and it still sort of exists, but that came along a little later. And what was unique about that was that it was all gangster. So it was Bay and Deep South, Dirty South, and that was sort of like mid 90s on, and maybe early 90s. And first it was like this big newspaper style one, and then it kind of went down to like a regular glossy magazine. And so that was Black Dog Bone. Lachlan McIntyre was the guy who did 4080. So he did that, and he had a good crew of people. There was many contributors. Eric Arnold was kind of like his editor, worked with him.
Great writer.
Yeah, and then so he was there, and then I was one of many contributing writers. And again, there was a thing like they were like, "Well, we don't have any money," and I'm like, "Okay, well." I've also figured this out, and then one of the guys that I've worked closely with all along is Doggish, aka Jeff Frontala. So he would do all the graphics. So we started working together from '93 when we did the TV show on Soulbeat. So I would say, okay, well, how about you give me an ad in the back of the magazine? So I'd put in a "Fuck the Bullshit" T-shirt, because that was the name of the Pirate Radio show when we started, an ad for that. So we kind of trade out. But so this was Lachlan McIntyre. He started out in Santa Cruz, and he was at the university down there, and I think Eric was down there too. So it kind of started out, and they kind of put together some things. They sort of took a little bit of the Bombs blueprint and then built up off of it, and then they went to a glossy format, and then took it, and and it was doing really well. And then things kind of just sort of came to a halt because of personal issues, and then just the whole economics of running it.
Right.
But major props to Eric and Lachlan and all of those guys for doing it, because they put a lot of artists on the covers, on the map, that otherwise would have been slept on.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, again, it was just very indicative of how supportive that whole scene kind of is of the local talent. I feel like, for sure.
And another thing, if I may just say too, is that the rap scenes at that time, up and down the West Coast and all over the country, were great. I mean, there were so many different ones up, whether it was in Seattle or out of LA or just different parts. Like, there's so many great little magazines, and you'd mentioned the Vinyl Exchange. And, these are people who put out these things just purely from love. Sometimes they might do it, as I said, to get free records at first. But
they're covering those records
but they're,
too.
but they're and they were doing the ones that they loved and they wanted.
Right.
And there was a whole scene that was just very vibrant.
Can you remember some off the top of your head?
Let's
That come to mind?
Sure, there's Informer, like just in the Bay Area alone.
Right.
And I even did one myself too. I did one in conjunction with a guy called Docs that was called No Joke, and then switched
Joke,
to and then
yes.
it became Strivin'. But there was other ones too, like there was Roots. It was another one that was from Berkeley as well, and it was more kind of African American themed compared to 4080. And let's see, what other ones were there? There was out of Sacramento. There was one. What was it called? I think Informer. I have a whole. I sort of have a habit of archiving everything, so I
Yeah,
have all of
likewise.
these ones. At
Yeah,
home.
I know that there was one called The Flavor, which was from the
Seattle,
Northwest.
right.
Yeah, that was huge. And you know what? A lot of really, really talented,
Props, I think, was another one.
right?
Yeah.
Lots of great writers came out of
Yes.
all that stuff. You had Jazzbo, who I'm sure you remember, Soul Sides, which we haven't
Well,
even talked about. But
And again, Dave Paul, I got nothing but love for that guy.
Right.
And he, if you go back to his magazine, The Bomb, and
Right.
as you pointed out, it sort of was, well, first I met him because I met him in the late 80s and he was on KCSF. And he goes, yo, man, how are you going to write about my thing in The Source? I'm like, who are you? And he goes, I'm Dave Paul. And he goes, I do a show on the community college, City College of San Francisco.
Right.
KCSF, I think it's called. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's only on cable. Well, I lived in San Francisco at the time for a couple of years in North Beach. And I was like, oh, you can pick it up on channel 27, audio only. And otherwise you'd hear it just in the dorms. But he is like one of the most driven, motivated people I knew. So he took that, and even though it was only on cable, San Francisco, which a lot of times people didn't know where to find it or when.
Right.
And on just within the campus sort of broadcast, just sort of not on the FM dial. And he did it, like turned it into like he did like a little one sheet that had his charts, and then he turned it into a two sheet back and front and put on pictures. Then it became a magazine, and then it always stayed as a black and white magazine. But as you mentioned, he had Jazzbo, Jeff Chang, aka DJ Zan, at
Right.
the time, and so many great writers that contributed.
yeah, Dave Tompkins, Hua Su, I don't even know if Oliver Wang possibly too. You know.
No, he wasn't. That was before his time.
Right, right. But yeah, and I mean, even I was looking back, maybe even like Peanut Butter Wolf or Shadow too.
Yes,
They were
yes.
starting to do reviews.
Yeah.
Steph, DJ Steph, I would think. Yeah. Just so it's dope to like kind of remember that too, because it was artists and writers and kind of people on the scene and DJs all kind of doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You know.
And I do think that so many people started out as DJs too.
Oh,
Like
no
nearly
question.
all of those writers were also DJs.
Right, right. Did you know Dave Funkenklein?
Yes.
Yeah. What was he like? Because
He was a real nice guy.
Yeah, he was he lived out there too, right? Or did he come to in the Bay at one point?
He visited the Bay. He would come visit during the Gavin,
Right. Okay. Right.
but he didn't live there.
Yeah, he was such a. Now looking back,
A
too,
visionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for some people that might not know who he was,
And he was into the Japanese stuff too early on.
yeah, and he took he took American artists to Japan too. But he would be probably most known as the head A&R of Hollywood Basic Records, and would sign Organized Confusion and Peanut Butter Wolf and Charisma, Zimbabwe Legit, which
Yeah.
would be DJ Shadow's first
Yeah.
appearance on Wax.
Yeah.
And a host of others I'm probably forgetting too. So it's just trying to kind of put all the pieces together, because Billy Jam, really, you're like kind of always revolved around multiple scenes like that too. So trying to think where we can go from here, because we've covered so many artists, and I know you have a show coming up too. Right?
I'm going to be jumping on the air here shortly. Yes, on WFMU.
Are you going to be live on WFMU?
Yep.
Okay, so
We'll have Scott make sure that we don't lose any of this too.
are you going live from this room though?
No, I'm going
you
to go
gotta
downstairs
Okay.
and second floor. So, any more questions?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can wrap this up too. I mean, I guess because we were kind of really focused on the mid '90s, but one really quick thing I want to talk about was when you came to New York and started with doing your FMU thing for a while. When I was at the Knitting Factory, if you can remember,
Yeah.
you would come and we would do these kind of like pirate radio style things,
yeah.
where we would do live radio shows in the bar in the daytime, like usually before I had a hip hop show.
Yeah.
which is just kind of such a, and you would sort of do this
And-
man on the street thing.
Exactly.
We have rappers come.
And then we had one where it was Dose One, and it ended up on one of his albums. It was Dose One versus Bisque, and we
right.
did one where it was like a freestyle battle, and he was clearly the winner.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and then just kind of to bring it into the present too.
So, okay.
No. Please go ahead.
What I was going to say is that, so the thing that with WFMU, and I just have so much love for this radio station.
As do I.
Yeah, and Ken Friedman is a visionary. You know, the way he sort of led this station and kept it going. And if you go to the website, wfmu.org, it's way better than any commercial or any other ones out there. I want to make sure we don't miss him before he goes, so we can make sure we get this saved.
Right.
But anyway, so, but for here, one of the things that I did was I got thanks to Scott Williams, who's been helping us with this engineering of this recording. But thanks to him, I learned about how to do remote broadcasts, and I started doing them. So I went to United Kingdom, to Ireland, to Hungary,
Wow.
from the West Coast, and started doing live remote broadcasts, and like the ones you were mentioning from the Knitting Factory when it was still downtown Manhattan.
Yes.
And realizing that, yeah, you can take radio out anywhere and do it live. And the thing about live radio, it's just hard to beat that, you know, just the vibe of it. Even if you record something and you know it's going to play back tomorrow and you don't have any edits, it's still not the exact same as doing it live in the moment on the air.
Oh yeah, something about capturing that spontaneity is just, it's priceless. Well, listen, I appreciate your time so much.
Well, I appreciate you, being interested in talking to me. So thank you so much, Peter.
You have an amazing story. Yeah, thanks so much. And I want to also just say thanks to WFMU for letting me come here and you allowing us to record here. I usually do it with a little handheld mic, so this feels great. I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
So that was it. That was my talk with Billy Jam. He's dope. He's amazing. I wanted to say thank you, Billy, for taking the time and let me come in there to WFMU. I also want to thank the station, WFMU. Incredible place. Just a great vibe all around. And yeah, it's the way it should be. You know what I'm saying? There's not enough shit like that right now. We got a lot of the other stuff that we don't need, and not enough of people like Billy and outlets like WFMU. So yeah, I appreciate it. I'm grateful for that. So if you're listening to this, know that I'm thankful again. It's Thanksgiving, so I'm trying to be thankful and express that. As you know, many may know, I also DJ, and I go by the name DJ Thanksgiving Brown. This is my particular time of year. I love being able to show love to people and all that. So with that being said, thank you again for tuning in to The House List. This was recorded at WFMU, yet like this and all my other episodes, edited and engineered by CJ Stewart, opening music by Dame Funk and Keith Ide. Please subscribe on iTunes, leave a comment, let me know that you like it, let me know that you think it's cool, let me know, even if you're lukewarm on it, let me know what you think, just know that I appreciate it. One love, y'all. Have a good week, and hopefully I'll see you at the end of this week with an all-new episode too. I'm not going to say who it is just yet, but it's going to be a cool one for sure. So keep tuning in to The House List with your man Peter Agostin. Thank you.